Hello everybody, my name is Eric, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive at the types of malware inspired by a great video by MS Paint Explanations, where he went over the categories of malware and what they are like. Well, what we're going to do is, we've got the categories here. I've abridged them a bit to be a bit more modern, and then we're actually going to try them live on Anyone, who have sponsored this video, to help show how all of these different malwares work, how you can analyze them quickly, and what the threats that are really going around today look like, with a bit of a nod to classic malware as well, because that is always fun. Now, I'm going to start with something juicy, and that is because it's going to be, and this one is going to be require a bit more explanation than showing, because rootkits are by their definition. Now, I'm going to be using the Omni Rat, which uses the R77 rootkit as its rootkit, because it shows a couple of interesting traits in malware. It is a rootkit, it is a rat, which is, in my opinion, the scariest kind of malware, certainly as an individual, and it is fileless, which you may find to be difficult to exist. So we'll go over that first of all. Then we'll look at some more types of malware. So here we go. So it is distributed in a batch file. This is a string of random characters, and the first run of the file actually calls the file again. I did make a deobfuscator partially for these batch files, and they are just a mess of obfuscated code that ultimately drop a .NET assembly that then persists itself in the Windows registry. So that's how we achieve fileless malware. We persist in the Windows registry without creating a file, and we inject either Explorer or WinLogin using process hollowing. I should be clear, because YouTube's bots are watching and have repeatedly banned me, so I should be clear. When I say we, I mean the malware. I do not endorse this. I am just explaining for educational purposes how this payload works, and I'm also going to show you a further explanation here. Now, the rootkit part of this has also been used to drop a crypto miner. I think this is a good point as well to explain what really is a rootkit, because there are a lot of bad definitions. First of all, a rootkit is most certainly not an anti-cheat that uses high privileges. A rootkit is a piece of software that somehow, either using very high privileges, that's one method that exists, or by being very creative with less privileges, makes itself invisible. Not in the sense of being undetected. Most rootkits are well detected by antivirus. Sometimes they're able to crypt so that they can briefly not be. But the goal is, once they've gotten in, an antivirus or enterprise EDR will not detect their presence, and you will not see their presence. So that could be as simple as the Sony rootkit, which simply added a prefix. What it did was, any folder that had this on it would not be visible. Now, inevitably, the fatal problem with this is, beyond being a rootkit to hide Sony's copy protection software, this was then exploitable. And some rootkits, although this is less common nowadays, might make the same mistake. Now, this creates a registry key for its persistence and configuration, and then it loads. Now, the Omni rootkit used the $sign nya, as in the sound that a cat makes in Japanese, but other users of this technique will use different ones. It uses process hollowing, then it uses WinLogin, and as a result, it looks like the process was running under a legitimate WinLogin. Very hard to trace out. Luckily, using a sandbox can make things easier, because you can see step by step. Okay, we have any run script tracer, which I will pull up. You can see, okay, so what did each script do? This one just starts another script, and we can go to this script, and we can see, okay, is there anything suspicious happening here? And in this case, this is an anti-analysis technique. We can get a better idea of what's going on. And from here, we can see that the assembly has been dynamically loaded, encryption, which is a part of how the payload is handled. And there we go. So that is one of the more sophisticated things of doing, and this, in fact, was made by a pretty young threat actor who, to my understanding, has had to quit because of real-life realities, dare I say. But there are other similar. There are a lot of rats which are based on a combination of that rootkit and a certain .NET open source rat. So that's one type of attack. All right. Now the one, and in fact, to the title of the original video that I think we should do next, because it's really important, viruses. First of all, I think, much like how Googling is a generic thing at this point, using virus to refer to malware is perfectly fine and is widely done. But what actually is a computer virus? Well, we're going to try one out, and I'll show you what a computer virus specifically is. It's not as common as it used to be. Now we're going to go to the interface where we can choose what settings are necessary for the analysis. We'll give this a fair amount of time, and that should be all we need. Now we can, of course, choose our privacy. If you're a business customer, probably want private. I'm going to leave it either as who has link or public so that you, in the description below, can also go and see what this analysis. I think that makes it more fun. And we can also choose our Windows version. It's another benefit of doing this kind of a video of the sandbox is because these programs are from different eras, it's easier to choose period correct, which is available. Or, as we do have one Linux payload, we can go right over to Linux if we need to. So we're going to go with Windows 7 for this because this malware was compiled in 2011. But it still works on modern Windows 11 if you let it through Windows Defender. It won't take long until we start to notice modification. So the file is now running. We can go on over to the actions page where we can see from any run persistence and other later delayed actions the malware has taken. This is great to quickly identify how a threat becomes persistent. Well, first of all, it puts itself into startup so that we will never be rid of it. And then it gets right to work. Now look, all of our software has suddenly been modified. How does this work? Well, what's actually happening here, and this is why we call it a virus, is our EXEs have all been replaced. They've been moved as well. There's a little stub that will check, first of all, if it is named ground.exe, it will run the payload that you're seeing here. If it is not named ground.exe, it will check if there is a file named ground.exe, and if there isn't a file named ground.exe, it then installs itself before proceeding to its main payload. Now, this virus does something else that is really funny, and it's not entirely reliable in doing it. But what it does, when it wants to, is it adds an I am sorry to every... It doesn't do that part very reliably, sadly, but you can see every single file here has been modified. And if we look, we can go to that, and we can actually see all of these EXEs are the same, right? You see the executable is the same, and they should have the same hash. They do, and as a result, VirusTotal is flagging this as Grenum malware. So that is an example of virus. They were mainly made in the era where malware was more funny and destructive, but they have a really long tail because they don't, even if the C2 server is gone, they will still spread because people will share executables. You can understand what types of activities that I'm not allowed to say on YouTube people might share executables in, but people share executables. And as a result, these can go from computer to computer. A recent case, you remember the Endgame Gear drama? Well, what likely happened there, because the malware they shipped was a file infector, is that one of their developers, or whoever uploaded the files on his computer, which must have had Windows Defender disabled, downloaded a file infector, and it infected the file that then got distributed. That's another vector for file infectors. They're really, in a lot of ways, they're a much simpler version of APT's supply chain compromise. Viruses could also infect different types of files, and they can work in different ways. A classical example is the CIH virus from the 1990s, which also had a time bomb in it, meaning it would go off at a certain date. It could actually even, in some cases, destroy the BIOS. The creator seemingly named it after himself, which is never a good idea for OPSEC. It was quite something. And now this one, the technique used here doesn't really work as well because the PE file and I think data execution prevention also played a role in why this type of attack isn't as viable. But what it would do is it would put the code into gaps so that if it was present, you couldn't tell, right? You could see in the ground example that the infected files always had a different file size than the uninfected files. If the real file stays in the same file, it gets bigger, and if the real file is moved, it gets smaller. Well, CIH didn't have either problem because it simply changed unused data. All right, now let's take a look at cryptojacking. Crypto mining, these things are called different things, but you can guess what that might do. Now this, I'm guessing, is targeting gamers, but it's supposed to be a run first patch, but in reality, it's a Monero miner. So let's take a look at what exactly is going on here. Now here we will turn on some of the internet tracking features, because in order to mine cryptocurrency, you need to make network requests to a mining pool, or there's a different way, or to a node, but they're going to use a pool, which is one of the ways you can detect this kind of thing. And this malware is a real nuisance because, as people know, mining cryptocurrency uses a lot of energy and resources, and as a result, if you have a crypto miner installed, your computer will use more energy, your room will get hotter, especially in the summer, can reduce the lifespan of your components, and slow your computer down. Now, immediately we can see all the activity we would expect. DNS requests to mining sites, connections. Oh, XMRig is not encrypted, so we can read it. And we can see a client joining a Monero mining. This is a common technique. Malware will often bundle this or use it as a primary form of attack. There are different ways. In this case, it seems like the user was tricked into running this, but sometimes it can also spread by worms. The name hidecmd.vbs makes it fairly obvious what kind of activity we can expect here. But and we can also see the vulnerable winring.sys driver being used. I'm not entirely sure what that's being used for, but it could be as simple as fan control, which is what it is sometimes used to see, like, how much heat are they creating. Maybe they're even going to try and cycle their usage so that it wouldn't become as obvious. Because if your computer is suddenly mining crypto, your fans will be going nuts when you're not using your computer. Most of these, they'll wait for it to be inactive, and then they will steal your resources. There we go. Now, XMRig is technically legitimate software in that if you wanted to mine Monero on your own hardware, that's perfectly fine. But if XMRig is bundled with something, that's probably malware. Now let's take a look at another type, the browser hijacker. If you've ever seen any of my sketchy ads videos, this is a common one. And as an aside, because in the original video, I saw malvertising called out as a type of malware, which it really, in most cases, isn't. Now this is a funny named. It's called Wikipedia Browser. Also, I did just want to give a quick shout out to GitHub user LJ9859, who had the Wikipedia Browser and also the classic rogue antivirus I'm going to show you in a minute. He put a great archive on GitHub. I'm not going to link it because you should probably give me a strike for doing that, but good work. You can, of course, use any browser to browse Wikipedia, and Wikipedia does not have a browser. It's also very clear from the fact they are impersonating a reputable website that there is no question that this is going to be malicious. And here we go, Wikipedia Browser. Now, does this look legitimate to you? No. But let's keep going. Depending on how old this is, we will see. It does seem to have a free software license. Yeah, we can be pretty confident this is a yes. And then we will run Wikipedia Browser. Thank you for using install creator. It's actually a click team. Now let's try this out. I'm going to try searching for my name. And it seems that the main setup here is offline. Now, browser hijackers can come in a couple of forms. One is something like this, or like Wave Browser, which, now more generally, you could call these things POPs, especially for something like Wave Browser, which might purportedly have, well, it's a browser. It will try and get you to make it default. Some of them try to avoid directly heading right into the territory of crime, whereas some are more blatant. And if you read the advanced options, you'll probably figure out that we've accepted some terms we probably didn't want to. But there you go. Now, these are usually a reskin of Chrome. They can also take the form of extensions that will forcefully update your default browser to something you don't want, or your default search engine. And that is the monetization scheme. The old school way of doing it really doesn't work anymore, which was they would actually try and swap the ads on the pages. The ad networks are smart enough not to mostly avoid that practice, but that was one method. Now what they'll often do is they'll change your search engine, so we can search for my name, for example. Okay, because this seems to be an EU-based VM, and we can see pretty good. Yeah, there we go. And this seems to be using the Yahoo search extension, and they are getting paid for every search you make using that. So that's how the financial side of this works. Wave browser is sort of a gray area. I would call it a POP. There are others that are more blatant in there that will just try and... wave browser, at least you can see what you're getting, but you may not. Their ads are, in my opinion, a bit deceptive. Some will go a bit further. Now, staying in this category of software you're sometimes tricked into installing, let's look at rogue antivirus software and Scareware. This is Security Defender 2015. Give this a nice long duration, and we'll see auto interactivity may be helpful here. The value of auto interactivity in general is if you have an automated malware analysis pipeline. Malware often requires some level of interactivity. Maybe it'll ask you if you want to do something before you proceed and do it. That can help. Now, this is something that is often delivered by deceptive advertising. Old days, that might have been a flash exploit that might actually be able to just run it without your consent, but usually what they would do, and this one you can see is essentially a fake version of Windows Defender or Microsoft Security Essentials. We might have to use an older version of Windows to get this to work. And here we go. Just had to, that exe seemed to be a dud, so luckily there were two for this one. Security Scanner. Now, one of the things you'll notice about this, right, this has a Windows XP style, and that is because these apps tend to implement a lot of the low-level functions themselves. They're intended to be near impossible to get rid of. And of course, this is a fresh VM. You saw me set it up. Anyone does not ship malware with their VMs. So obviously, these are all fake hits. And in some cases, what they'll do is they'll go to a reputable vendor, or at least a known vendor like McAfee, and they will take their virus definitions, the names of them, and they will just inject them on random files on your computer, which, due to the fact that Windows ships a lot of executables, usually happen to be system files. Oh, here we go. We've even got a Mac OS 10. What? Did they not even proofread this? This is a Windows... Another one. I guess Apple must have hacked my VM. Fake MacDef. I don't actually know if that's real or not. So we've now got 25 infections. Now, this is the kind of malware that I really experienced a lot as a kid. And the way they would drop this is they would have a deceptive pop-up that would look like a system thing, saying, oftentimes it would be called My Computer, which on Windows XP was like the My Computer section, online virus scan. And I figured out that, to be fair, I was 11 years old, so I guess I couldn't have been expected. I figured this was a scam after I Googled it, and the fact that in the My Computer section, this didn't exist. Now, they'll ship you an exe that is needed to fix it. So we can try that. Sometimes it doesn't even work. We can go remove all threats. Now, if we activate it, they will try and get us paid. This is in many ways the OG ransomware. I think the shift was, in this era, cryptocurrency wasn't as big. And really to get paid for their cybercrime, they needed to trick you and the payment processors into processing the transaction and believing that it was legitimate. And there was a broader category of scareware, which could include completely fraudulent software like this. It could also include software that had very little use, like registry cleaners or PC optimizers, which to this day continue to be sold to gamers who don't know any better. Of course, I think the website for buying this is down. So we won't be able to activate it. We can also see, does it stop other apps from working? It doesn't seem to. Oh. It does. So that's the other thing that these rogue antiviruses would do. So, and that's where it sort of trends into ransomware, is it's not just scaring you, like some would be more passive. This is saying it is stopping you from being able to use your computer. It's claiming, like how viruses exist, that all of your exes are infected and that's why you can't use them. There's also other bogus features in here. And generally, these programs, like any other ransomware, if you did pay for them, you would either be able to uninstall the software or continue so-called using it. And it doesn't delete your system files. It will simply pretend to. So that's Security Scanner and other rogue antivirus software. Now let's talk about Trojans. And I have a beautiful example that I think is probably the best case for a Trojan and its existence. Now, I debated on my X and Blue Sky with people, and most people agree with me, that a Trojan is probably better described as a method of distribution of malware than it is a type of malware. But here is a rare exception where we find a real Trojan. I actually have a full video on this particular phishing scam because it is so clever, in my opinion. But essentially what's happened here, this is a fake video player shipped by one of those fraudulent websites that sent me an email claiming that there was copyright infringement in one of my videos and that I had to review it on their website. The goal was to get me to download this fake video player, which we'll watch, actually downloads from Dropbox a second stage payload, right? Loading video content, connecting to secure server. It's Trojan because you're looking at this and it says it's doing this. Not a real video player. There is no code in here. I decompiled the whole thing. There is no code that could possibly play a video, but that's the claim, to get you to wait while and it does when it says downloading content, it is actually running the Infostealer. So I thought that was the perfect quintessential example of Trojan. In practice, Trojans are usually there's usually no program that comes. It will usually claim to be one purpose, like a video game cheat, will actually ship something like this, an Infostealer. Now with an Infostealer, we will turn on, we'll see if we can get, potentially capture some of the packets. And there's something really funny with this sample that I'm going to show you. Because this is Lumastealer, which is quite well known. It's been partially disrupted now. But Lumastealer does something funny. This is unpacked. I unpacked it myself, which is when you take it, when software is used, usually they will crypt it. Now, because Luma doesn't want researchers getting a copy of unpacked Luma, they put this message in so that no one would use it unpacked. I unpacked it myself, and I just thought this was funny, so we'll run this. If we do click, do you want to run a malware? If we click yes, the payload runs as normal. And of course, it immediately gets detected because it's not packed anymore. And we can see, first of all, this one uses the Steam profile method. Ultimately, that is so that if the C2 server ever goes down, the profile, it will still be able to find updates. And we can, because this is just Steam and not a harmful website, we can simply open this in another tab. And we'll go down to this user as previously played as, and it looks like it's all gone now. But at some point, it would have, on its previously played as, have C2 domains. That's the trick. And luckily, a lot of these C2 domains have now actually been seized by Microsoft. So if we go here, we may see a seizure notice. Yup, perfection. This domain has been seized by Microsoft, who have shut down a lot of Luma's infrastructure. Good work. But that's not what Luma intended to happen. What should have happened is your files would have been captured and uploaded. And you can even see in the HTTP request some of what would have happened. Infostealers steal all the credentials in your browser. They'll steal everything in your crypto wallets and send that to a remote server. Infostealers are, in my opinion, the biggest. They're the biggest cybersecurity threat. And they're rarely detected while they are relevant by antivirus because they are so simple to execute. All right, now no video about every type of malware would possibly be complete without ransomware. One of the most economically devastating, especially for businesses. Ransomware can bring your whole system to its knees. It is awful. We're going to look at it. I'm going to set this up. We don't need the internet settings for this because it's ransomware. And let's get to work. Now, ransomware is software that takes away your files or otherwise denies you the ability to use your computer unless you pay them. Usually it does this, it's just going to encrypt all of our files, right? We've got, and any run conveniently includes, in every sandbox instance, these sample files. So ransomware will see those and immediately go for them. But it may take a bit of time, which is why I've given this VM a bit of longer runtime. Now, there's no solid indication without having the tools that we have here, where we can see what looks like C2 activity, and we can see, oh no, I don't like file decrypt.txt at all. That's not a good sign. And it will wait before showing that to us. Oh, encrypted by Gandcrab. Dear admin. And for further steps, we can read the decrypt that is located in every encrypted folder. Now, as this ransomware has suggested, our files are now gone. And it is important to note that, barring a few exceptions, don't waste your money on services which claim that are not the original threat actor. They'll say, oh, we've hacked. That's almost always another scam, sometimes called a recovery room scam. All your files, documents, photos, databases, and other important files have this extension. The only method of recovering files is to purchase a unique private key. Only we can give you this key, and only we can recover your files. Ha 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 ha. We are so evil, they're trying to say. The server with your key is in a closed network Tor. You can get there. And of course, this is going to be long dead. But that's where we would be able to pay. And the way this works is with public key, private key encryption. And these guys will even decrypt one file, because they're nice, for you for free. Now, how do you deal with ransomware? Well, of course, checking what you're running, having a security system that protects you from ransomware, and a really important one, backups. Making it so, and within that, locking down your environment such that ransomware can't just pivot and encrypt everything at once, having your backups be separate from your production systems. There is one other funny trick I will share, because ransomware, unlike, and that is one of the ways that it is differentiated from the rogue security software, ransomware usually doesn't want to break your whole computer. So one way that you can, if you have a really important piece of data and you don't want it to be encrypted, remember that you can name a file anything. So you can do, the fact that this is not executable code will not stop most ransomware. Suppose this was a picture of your wife who it's going to survive. So that's a method that you could potentially use to defeat such problems. And there is one more thing we're going to talk about today, which is botnets and worms. Now, one example of a worm that, of course, given it is probably my most famous video, we can't ignore, is the Windows XP net worms that can allow older operating systems to just be taken over. Now, because modern desktop computers are usually behind a NAT, that is a very rare type of attack these days. But in servers, especially IoT devices, which will often port forward themselves using UPnP, this type of threat is still very much real. This is Mirai, which is a botnet worm that scans for vulnerable servers, connects back to a C2, and then continues to scan for more. It will look for telnet servers. It can brute force. It has a variety of payloads. A lot of Internet of Things devices, think like smart devices, and it also is sometimes distributed using the traditional social engineering. Botnets can be used for a lot of things. DDoSing is one example. They can be used to provide sketchy residential proxy services, which are used by fraudsters to commit more. Sometimes will be used like if they're going to steal an account so that they can conceal that. There's a lot of things that can be done with botnets and worms. And here you can see, we can see the kinds of network activity it's doing. You might be able to see something that looks, this thing is calling itself wget, but it's not the real wget. Then it downloads a Mirai, actual corporate privacy violation. See a Mirai download, and lots of very questionable traffic, and it just keeps on sending out data. Now, parts of this payload are dead, but I did see another public run of this that shows what would have happened earlier. And then it iterates through, and in this one it's got different, because it knows, of course, that it's targeting Internet of Things devices, which may not always run on the same architecture. It will keep trying until it finally gets the right one. And then after running it, it even outputs a nice little status update and tries to go to our command and control server and attempts a port scan, which is typical of botnets, because it is going to try and find more vulnerable Linux systems to take over. Now, I ran this using a feature called FakeNet that anyone has that allows the sandbox to essentially provide a simulated internet so that we're not potentially sending, I don't want to send abusive, I don't want to try and, send data that's potentially hacking other people's servers, even in a test, but we also cannot demonstrate this sample without internet access. So that's when that can come in handy. Now, there are other types of worms around, and besides Internet of Things devices, I have occasionally seen server hosts selling vulnerable servers with their default image, which, as you've seen in my Windows XP video, a vulnerable server exposed to the internet gets pwned pretty much immediately. Okay, now let's see. How long does it take? Place your bets. We can open up IE as well if we want to. I love how it warns you that you're viewing viewing an SSL instead of warning you that you're not, because you wouldn't want to accidentally have security. Okay, so now we're just going to leave this system to cook for a while, and then we can come back and see if it catches anything. It's almost like how police have a bait go. Okay, so just a few minutes later, we have already got, as you can see in this video, boom. It took 15 minutes. I actually thought, because I recorded this before I was going to eat dinner, the first part of that video, and I actually happened to look at the VM before I left to go eat dinner. I saw, oh, wait a second, the thing's already been pwned, so I don't even have to wait. It was faster than I was expecting, because it is possible just to brute force port scan for vulnerable devices, and if you expose a vulnerable computer to the internet, it gets pwned very quickly. So that's worms for you. Now, finally, to talk about malvertising, which was another, I would say similar to Trojan. That is a distribution method, not a type of malware, but that's not necessarily wrong. So we got, and I've made plenty of videos on this subject. In general, these days, and there was a thing with the site BuzzHeavier. It was an anonymous file sharing site. They, for a while, worked with an ad network that would just work like the download and put a Luma stealer. That seems to be gone now, which is good on their part. And pop-unders can sometimes be like, but it's very rare nowadays for an ad to just pop your browser. Back when Flash was used to serve ads, it was a lot more common. Now that doesn't really happen. What you do see is this kind of stuff, where they'll try and get you to download something. Sometimes it's malware. Most of the time, it'll be adware, which will just fill your computer with more ads, or pops like something like a Wave browser. And here we've got, I'm just looking, and this is where you might find it. Now, it seems a lot of these have potentially, malvertising has declined to some extent. And a big part of that is because Google, who control the most popular web browser, oh my goodness, this is endless, have added some protections against downloads, and their scanner is better, so it'll oftentimes take a bit more social engineering to get people to run something. Okay, they've definitely made, whatever they've done to AdFly is way more confusing than it used to be. And what on earth? Now this one will go to the real link, where we can see more ads, and this is where you'll find things like this, and Google has gotten a tiny bit better. But you'll see an ad that looks like this, and if we click it, we're going to end up with Wave browser, which I think certainly is not something you want to install, and it will claim to have other stuff like, oh, it's a file converter now. Great, it's a file converter. And it has like these little tiny value adds to try and justify it. I would not recommend installing this. So that's going to be all for this investigation. Now, thank you to Anyrun for sponsoring this and providing software that really makes it easy to go through and showcase a bunch of malware at once. This is going to be on the longer side from my videos, but it would be a lot longer otherwise, having to set up VMs, everything. It's convenient because you can just do everything in the cloud, and it's interactive, so you can use it like you would manually a VM, but there's also automated analysis that can give you a quick answer and the ability to automate interactivity and script if that's what you're needing to do. And here is what you can get. If you click the link in the description, you can sign up with your business email, free non-commercial usage evaluation. You can get a lot of basic stuff, commercial usage. Here you go. You get this. You get a much longer runtime. So if you're testing something like a ransomware, great. Input file size bigger. Export more stuff. So when you're downloading samples, like if you want to research, like what we did in this video, the types of threats available, great. Yeah, script tracing, which is great. MITM proxy, you're dealing with an Infostealer, you want to see what might be leaving your system. Lots of great stuff here. And you also get threat intelligence statistics and lookups. So we can go to the threat intelligence and we can look up specifically what's going on with a specific threat. I use this tool a lot, as people can see, and I recommend it. So thank you to Anyrun for sponsoring this video and allowing me to tell you about their great product. That's all from me for now. Bye.